Hey friends, so good to be with you today for this two-part episode of Permission to Be. Our guest is Dr. Lisa Sharon Harper. I paused there because I was quickly trying to think of a superlative to describe her by, and truly, words escape me. So I will be brief with this introduction because honestly, we don't need an additional one, but I just wanted to note that we'll be talking a lot about Dr. Harper's new book called Fortune: How Race Broke My Family and the World, and How to Repair It All. And the only thing that I wanted to say is this is one of those glimpses that we get. This conversation made me feel like I was a child again, sitting in my mother's living room, where she would just break off into story about our family history. Because Olivia has relationship and works with Dr. Harper, the conversation has that feel to it, and so I'd like to invite you into this tradition, which is so special to my lineage of oral history telling, as Dr. Lisa Sharon Harper unpacks her book and shares graciously and generously her wisdom. All right, see ya.
I first heard you on a podcast. I don't remember whose it was, but you were on a panel. It was like, and they were talking about evangelicalism, and you were talking about, the gist of it was, I'm not ceding that ground. So you were like, yeah. I'm not giving up that title just because of this. It was post the election of Trump. And so the point you were making was, I'm not giving up that. And then so you started going into the history of it. Mm-hmm. And I had never heard that history. So, I didn't know any of that. So I Googled and I was like, wow. First of all, it was, is she black? Because I couldn't tell just from listening.
Oh, isn't that funny? Oh my gosh.
Who is she? Well, later in the podcast, you disclose that because you start talking about the African American part. But at first, I was like, is she even black? And so I learned about the Very Good Gospel, and then I found a YouTube video of you speaking and talking about your great-great-grandmother Leah. I will never forget that night. And if they had showed up with her and told her about the force, that whole thing. Here's your track, and you can have Jesus when you die. And so how she would have felt like, well, I'm a breeder and, have been forced to have 17 kids. So what about now? And
yeah, exactly.
When we were going to, we went to Evolving Faith 2018. So when we were going to 2019 and we were debating, and I was looking at the brochure and I was like, oh my God, it's Lisa Sharon Harper. I mean, okay, so now I really want to go. And
oh my God! You were just talking me up. Like,
Lord. We're not done. We're not done.
Oh my gosh! I'm not going to be able to leave my office. My head is going to be way too big.
I wanted to go anywhere, but I was like, Lisa Sharon Harper, and my husband had listened to we had gone on Apple Podcasts and done a search for your name and found 10 different, every time that we saw a Lisa Sharon Harper podcast where you were a guest on a podcast, we had listened to them. And so we got there, and I sent him a text that said, we got separated at lunch on the second day. And I said, if I get to meet Lisa Sharon Harper, I will faint. And he was helping Jeff Chu with the communion that second day. And he came and found you.
Yes.
And
I remember
so
that.
then he sent me, next thing I know, I'm eating
and
myself.
You freaked out.
Yeah, he sent me a selfie of the two of you. And I was like, what?
He said, my wife
you manifested Lisa Sharon Harper. And so, I was on the other side of the University of Denver campus running frantically.
Oh my God, I didn't even know all that. Oh my God.
There was all this undergirding backstory why it even, mattered to me. And so that started me following you. And then, So when you announced the Global Writers Group, I had been following you since Denver, but all of that led up to that. So literally, I prayed that meeting into existence.
You must have, because that was kind of random. He literally just walked up to me and said, "Can I get a selfie with you?" And he said, "My wife is going to flip." And then you were there flipping. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. Well, I mean, honestly, though, Olivia, oh my gosh, like it's just been so great to know you and to know your writing, because you really are an incredibly great writer. Mm-hmm. And you can tell a story and you paint a picture, and you also have a cadence to your writing that is, it just drives you. It drives the reader, and you just see these images flash and you get it. Like you just get it in your soul, what you're talking about. So, you know, it's been great. It's been great to meet you. And so I'm glad that your husband did the selfie.
My husband does some over the top things sometimes. And sometimes they just have wonderfully miraculous results. This was definitely.
And now you're a scribe. She's a scribe, y'all, with the Global Writers Group. She's actually in charge of one of our weekdays where people come and just write in the writing room. So, I mean, I benefited from that selfie too. So there you go.
Hello, and welcome to Permission to Be.
Let's hit him with the remix.
Oh, well, y'all got to change that.
Yes.
What do we do?
We leave our F-bombs in, and
let's tell some stories.
As long as white people are bound, the people in power are bound, they're going to keep us bound to the same thing that they're bound to.
Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, and I think out of the overflow of the spirit, the body does.
Challenge some narratives.
Why is that the best that God could offer you?
Mike made it very clear that he did not want to get any of these questions beforehand. So he is getting this question live, raw, for the very first time.
This is...
And I feel like art is the expression of the heart where words fail.
oh my goodness, I have tears. Oh, y'all are killing it.
Unfiltered.
I feel like that's gotta sound strange.
Permission to be.
Actually, my literary agent, when we were talking about what book might I write, he was like, I mean, A Black Man with Hope is an interesting book.
Oh, shit. Welcome to Permission to Be, friends. We have Dr. Lisa Sharon Harper with us this evening, and already what a joy, what a absolute joy it is to be in your presence and with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tommy. Thank you. It really is. It's awesome to be with you guys.
Yeah. Can we? I actually wanted to continue that story that Olivia was telling, because the same conference, same year that selfie happened was the same year that I actually met Olivia in Hiawatha at the Evolving Conference. Faith conference, right? So I'm sitting here just thinking about this synchronicity, and I remember hearing you speak, and I sat up in my chair, and I was like, because I was so enraptured at your storytelling and the way in which you preach the gospel with such a freedom. I'm going to use the term like elder, but what I mean by that is those who have gone before us. It was very much like, oh, I need to learn from her. I need to sit at her feet and just listen. And so truly, I text back and I was like, we have to interview her, but then we were like, but we can't pay her, and we want to make sure that we're not abusing labor and working on our
Oh my gosh. Y'all are too woke. Y'all are a little bit too woke. I mean, I'm down with all of that. Really, I am down with all of that. But, you know, sometimes you just do it because you love it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just do it because you love it and you love the people. So
and that's what we're learning as we go, you know. And so through here we are, and we get to. I'm like, this is surreal looking back on the last 2 years and a pandemic and And so, welcome to the podcast. Becka, do you have anything to say and shower?
Oh my goodness. Y'all don't need to shower anymore. I feel squeaky clean. I'm squeaky clean right now.
Well, I mean, this is the Permission to Be podcast, aka Dr. Lisa Sharon Harper's fan club.
Oh my God.
Thrilled
I
that you're
found my
here.
fan club. Here it is. All three of you. It's so fabulous. It's so fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I know your work from Evolving Faith, and so I'm honored to have you here to listen, just to be in community and conversation. I know one thing here with our podcast is we never want this just to be, we're here just to answer the questions and check off our list and get it done. We want it to create an environment of community, to create an environment that begins relationships, and that nurtures relationships. And so all that to say, we are so excited that you could be here with us. Thank you.
Well, I am really, truly excited to enter into this relationship with you all. So, let's talk.
Yeah. Well,
do you want me to give the official? Do you want me to give the official? Introduction of who she is, and
yes, for those who are just about to embrace the amazingness that is Dr. Lisa Sharon Harper. Let's give a rundown of some of that awesomeness.
Okay. Lisa Sharon Harper is a prolific speaker, writer, and activist. She is the founder and president of Freedom Road, a consulting group dedicated to shrinking the narrative gap in our nation by designing forums and experiences that bring common understanding, commitment, and action. Lisa is the author of several books, which include Evangelical Does Not Equal Republican or Democrat, Left, Right, and Christ, Evangelical Faith and Politics, Forgive Us, Confessions of a Compromised Faith, and the book through which I was first introduced to her writing, The Very Good Gospel, How Everything Wrong Can Be Made Right. Lisa is also the curator of the Global Writers Group, which is the community through which I've interacted with her since April 2020. Global Writers is a group of writers whose skill ranges from amateur to professional that meet on Saturday mornings on Zoom to create and share our writing. Lisa has a new book being released on February the 8th, Fortune, How Race Broke My Family and the World and How to Repair It All. Because of my participation in the Global Writers Group, I've heard excerpts of the book as it was being written. And because I pre-purchased it, I've had access to an electronic pre-release copy in which I have been completely engrossed the last 4 days. And I am happy to affirm that it is a must-read work of nonfiction writing. Welcome again.
Oh, so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you guys. It's really, like I said before, it really is great to be with you, to get to know you, to be in conversation. And it's also kind of cool that we have this long trail of history with each other. And now, you get to be one of the groups that actually helps to interpret, fortune to the world and help people to see what's in this thing for them. So I want to just say thank you for asking me to come here. And I really am looking forward to this conversation.
We have firmly rooted this conversation in deep, deep gratitude. And I guess to get us started, I was in a writers group actually today, and I did a episode on speaking of racism with a friend, and they reminded me of something that I said about, I guess we were asking the question and talking about identity changes and existing in a capitalist system. We are always kind of identifying ourselves by these labels. In an effort to give permission to change, somehow the question came up of who are you today? And so one, I would ask you that question, who are you today? But also take some space and tell us, who have you been?
Who I am today is a dog mom. And so my dog is actually here in the room with me. And so you might have heard the jingling in the background. I don't know. I have a really great microphone, so maybe you didn't. But if you do hear the jingling, that's what that is. That's my dog.
Welcome, puppy.
Yes, her name is Babe. Hello, Babe. She just looked up. She's so cute. Oh my gosh, I just love her. And she's wearing this really great little hoodie, and it's got pockets. I just can't even get over it. I can't get over it. And earlier, she had on a backpack that was her harness. I was like, no. Like, gone are the days when I grew up, when you had a dog you just put in the backyard and fed every once in a while. It was just like, literally, like that's literally how we treated our dogs growing up, because that was just what you did. But no, this dog has a hoodie. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm a dog mom. I'm also a writer and an author, and all the things that you said. Thank you for that really beautiful introduction, Olivia. But I actually can't really describe who I am without talking about my family and those who came before me, because I literally am them. The DNA in my body comes from them. That just was one of the things that blew my mind in the course of my research, was just reflecting on the DNA results that have come back from several companies, Ancestry.com, DNA, 23andMe, and AfricanAncestry.com in particular. And realizing that the DNA in my 10 times great grandmother is in me. Like, she is in me. My 10, 13, 14, 15 times great grandfather is in me somewhere. Like, he's like, you know what I mean? Like part of my nose and I don't even know it. You know what I mean? Or something like that.
Love it.
Right. And that's just a really deep thought. So I can't say who I am without saying who they were. And ironically, that's the whole point of the book, right? Or that's one of the points of the book, is we actually do take a journey, really a pilgrimage through my family's story, going back 10 generations to 1682. So who I would say in short, just to kind of like surf over these stories, and we can dive in a little bit later, but I am Fortune. I come from Fortune's stock, as they actually would say on the census when they would go by, or the tax records. For her descendants, they would say from Fortune Games stock. So that, because people knew Fortune Game for some interesting reason. And probably because she was actually ended up being a Black woman who was free in Maryland in the 1700s, and all of her stock were free eventually, because their lineage traced back to a white woman. So Fortune's mother was Maudlin McGee. And it all goes back to those first race laws. I'll get back to that. But before we do that, I want to continue to surf a little bit. I am Henry and Harriet Lawrence, whose identities actually are incredibly fragmented because of government policies and the ways that our government policy, through the Native American removals and enslavement and the selling of people left, right, and center, and the raping of people, and the mulatto-ness of my family on that line, they really shapeshifted in terms of their identity. And you see that in that chapter. In fact, in chapter 2, what we do is we actually trace 2 separate possible Henry Lawrences. And I say separate as in the stories I've done are separate. They actually intertwine at one point, and there's a possibility that both of them are the same person, but I just don't know how it all comes together, right? I am Leah, who had 17 children and was enslaved in South Carolina, and was likely a breeder. Because she actually had 5 children before the end of the war, for whom we have no record at all. And it's likely that those children died or were sold away or gifted to other family members and taken deeper into the South. I am Leah. She's in me, literally in my DNA.
Yeah.
Just like really think about that. I am Willa, who lived just a block away when she was called for by her mother, Lizzie, Leah's grandchild. In the 1920s, she was called for because Lizzie came north, and I'm Lizzie as well. Lizzie came north, and she actually passed for white because she was octoroon. She was just 1/8 black. But when she could pass for white, and she brought her lightest child with her who could also pass. And she didn't say she was white. She just didn't say she was black, right? Which, if you see the movie Passing, that's Lizzie's story. And eventually, though, she was found out, and she brought her darker children north, and that's when my grandmother came. My grandmother always looked like she was an Eskimo. I always literally thought, she looks like she's mixed with a lot of different stuff. But she could not pass for white, so that's why she was left on the plantation. She never forgave her mother for that, for leaving her down there to pick cotton and earn her keep in South Carolina while she went north. But then she was finally brought, and I am my mother, Sharon Harper Lawrence, who grew up 1 block from here, went to school, and looked over at a box of books one day as she was running an errand for a teacher, because she was one of the top students in her entire class. And so, the top students don't need to study. So they end up running errands for the children throughout the day, or for the teachers throughout the day. And so she was running an errand and saw a box of books that was hand-me-down books from the white school 2 blocks away, which her mother, Willa, wanted her to go to, but she was not able to because they told her it's out of district, 2 blocks away. And her next door neighbor, who was white, went to that white school. Hello, somebody. So this is the North. This is Philadelphia. This is South Philly, right? So that's how segregation happened here. It was through the gatekeepers, and it was de facto in many areas. And I am my father, and the Weeks family, which traces its lineage back through Barbados to West Africa, likely Nigeria. And, they landed, according to Ancestry.com DNA, they landed in Barbados around circa 1750. And the thing that blew my mind when I was researching slavery in Barbados, and then also my family, like you can actually see the movement of that DNA line through Ancestry.com. It's like the science is amazing now. Within 1 generation, within 20 years, that line of the family, that DNA that originally was just in Barbados, within 20 years, it was in every island in the Lesser Antilles.
Wow.
In other words, they were sold into every island. Wow. Every island in the Lesser Antilles. And that basically means all the islands except for Haiti, I think, in Puerto Rico, the 2 big ones. Those are the Greater Antilles. So what does that mean? That means that in that line, I am that line. And in that line, there's brokenness because of separation that goes back hundreds of years, and a very little memory of actually having cohesive family for more than 1 generation. So people drop each other left, right, and center in that family. They just walk away, and literally walk away. Like just not come back. And that's easy to happen in that line of the family. And as I was tracing that Barbados story, I realized that's why. So, the book Fortune, it traces these lines of the family and asks, how did race, this construct called race, break the world? How did it do it? And what was the cost? What cost did we pay? Not just people of African descent, but Americans pay for this construct called race. What cost did white folk pay for being white, to be white? Y'all white people, hello, Becka.
yes,
all
I would be the one who
white
likes
people
melanin
listening
in the room. Yes.
Right, the only one who's like no melanin in the room. That's okay though, Becka. We love you, right? But Becka, your people paid a price in order to be called white in America. And that price was to be dislodged, just like we were dislodged. It happened to you too. We were dislodged from our land. We were dislodged from our language, from our food, from our culture, from our families, from our name. We were dislodged from everything in order to become Black. And only thing Black meant was created to make white men money. That's basically what it meant. It meant created to make white men money. That's what it meant. And so, whatever we did, we were there to make you money, and also to provide free labor and low-cost labor. Eventually, after the Civil War, it was low-cost labor and free still if you're in jail. But what did whiteness mean then? Whiteness doesn't exist without blackness. It literally was created at the same time through the same judicial rulings that were handed down throughout the early 1600s, like 1650s, basically up through about 1662. And then it was legislated into law in the colony of Virginia. What is whiteness for? Whiteness is to determine who has the divine right to rule and capacity to rule on land, on colonized land. So wherever you go in the world, you will find people who are dubbed white. But whiteness means something different in different localities. But it always means, in other words, I should say blackness and whiteness take different shape, but they always mean the same thing. That's what I mean. Whiteness, we're in Brazil, in Australia, in South Africa, and in South Carolina, always means one's created to rule by divine right. For people who are deemed black around the world in colonized spaces, that's what it means, is that they were created to be ruled, to provide free and low-class labor for those who rule. So basically, the book itself is asking the question, all right, so there's this construct, and this is how it happened, and this is how it impacted one family. Now let's imagine how it impacted the nation. And now let's ask, how do we fix it? So the last 3 chapters are essays on how to repair what race broke in the world. And there are 3 major points that we really dive into there: truth-telling, reparation, and forgiveness. The need to forgive that which can never be repaired.
Oh, so much depth. In so many places that we could go. One of the things that I was noticing, your words that you pick are very intentional. And as I was reading through chapter 1 and the story about your grandmother as you would comb her hair, and sort of the tense interaction that you had when you asked her about her hair, because it was straight, it wasn't, like us black folk coarse and as some would say, nappy, right?
It was bone straight.
Right?
It really was, yeah.
But you talk about this concept of remembering, but talk about how your mother was dismembering. Would you like to linger there for a little bit and maybe talk about what you mean and how it relates to the injury that racism has crafted, the construct of race has crafted with that remembering and dismembering?
Well, I don't think my mother was dismembering. I think my mother was dismembered. And I think my great grandmother, going all the way back to Fortune in 1687 when she was born, she was the first of our lot to be dismembered. And what I mean by that, actually, she wasn't. Sambo was the first of our lot to be dismembered that we know of, right? That we've been able to trace. Sambo was Fortune's father. he was dismembered from his tribe, from his people. We know now that Sambo was most likely from Senegal, and most likely from the southeastern area of Senegal, where Mali and Senegal and Guinea meet. Because of course they didn't have national boundaries at that time. It was just people groups in space. And so his people, Sambo is a Wolof name. And so that's part of the reason why we know. And it means second son. See, there was meaning, there was life, there was relationships that he had. He had dreams. He had a crush, I'm sure, right? He had family and grandmother and he had history, thousands and thousands of years on that land of history. And he was dismembered when somehow he ended up in the bowels of a slave ship, among the first, because the first slave ships that began to come to America directly to the North American continent, not stopping in the Caribbean, were in 1670. Those were the first slave ships, or I shouldn't say the first, they were the first major wave. There were like one every several years, maybe before that. And they would have like a small boat, or most of the enslaved people were coming directly from the Caribbean, but directly from Africa, that was 1670. So he's in this first wave of folks who are coming directly from Africa and being brought to the shores of Maryland, to this place he doesn't know the language. He's never been here before. He's hoping, I'm sure, as he looks over the Atlantic Ocean on that boat, on that ship, the death ship, where about 100 people died on that ship between the time when it left port on the Gambia River and reached the port in Maryland. And I'm sure that he was wondering if he would ever see them again, and he didn't. That's being dismembered. It's being disconnected from your roots, from what gives you life, from what gives meaning to life, from who you are. And so one of the things that struck me the most as I was writing the introduction, actually, and I was thinking about this, is that our generation, Gen X, is the first generation to be born on the other side of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. So just like there's a generation called the Born Free generation in South Africa, post-apartheid. They were born in post-apartheid. Well, the Gen Xers in America, Black Gen Xers, are the first generation in American history to be born on the other side of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. So my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, they were simply trying to survive. Like they were trying to survive the heinous political policies that were coming down and trying to corner them into small spaces in the world. For example, just after the fall of Reconstruction, the end of Reconstruction in South Carolina, a law was passed that prohibited people of African descent, anybody, from working in any profession except the fields and domestic work. Okay, I see you now shaking your head, right? Like, my God, my God. They had, now listen here, in this, it was 1865, the end of the Civil War, to 1877. So that's 12 good years, right? So 12 good years during Reconstruction. And really, Reconstruction really begins like in earnest in around 1667, because that's when the Civil Rights Act of 1666 was passed, and it went into force in 1667. Or sorry, I keep saying 1867. And so you had about really 10 years of Reconstruction. In that time, across the country, mostly in the South, you have more than 2,000 people of African descent that are elected into public offices all over the country. In South Carolina, we had senators, we had House representatives, we had mayors, we had every level of government. We had people leading. And then at the end of Reconstruction, it was like whiplash. It was terror. And within 20 years, almost all of the people of African descent were actually ejected, pushed out of office through gerrymandering and also through terror and intimidation, and even death. So that's the context within which my great grandmother, Martha, was born in 1865, and she rose up and into her preteen years at the end of Reconstruction. Right? She's literally 12 years old at the end of Reconstruction, and she has to witness this terror. And her daughter, Lizzie, is born right around that time, maybe 10 years into the end of Reconstruction, when you have race riots happening all over South Carolina. You have people die. I mean, literally 10 scores of people dying at a time, because what is happening there is Black folk are being put back in their place. So that's why they passed that law that said you can only work in the fields or in the home. Why? Because that's exactly where you worked under slavery, and we are going back. We're going back. That was the goal. And let me tell you, friends, it's still the goal.
Oh, Charlotte's doing it right now with gerrymandering voting lines right now.
It is still the goal.
Yeah,
it's still the goal.
I love the word dismembered. The nurse in me, think goes to the medical kind of that dismembering and the pain, and the violence that would be associated if that happened.
Yep.
In a way in which we typically think via a car accident, some form of trauma, and what we are now having language from people like Dr. Joy DeGruy, and many others who have done this research, is that this was a massive mental and psychological trauma.
Yes.
And then connecting that back to our DNA and how all of us are all of the people who have come before us. I just really feel the depths of and the gravity of that.
Yeah, we are. And so therefore we actually carry the trauma. We often carry the trauma of our ancestors, our family members. And we have a choice to continue to carry it, or we can let it go, because that was theirs to carry. And we can let it go, and we can carry our own trauma for today. That's the goal of Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, right? He says we have to get to clean pain. And the issue among us, people of African descent, is that we have never really had our moment of healing. Right? We've never had our moment of healing. We've never been able to have our moment of healing because we've never had reparation.
Say that.
We've never had truth telling. So every single time the truth is not told, every single time the truth is twisted, covered over, crushed, hidden, obliterated, that is trauma that's added to our DNA and our descendants' DNA every single time. So we carry it all. And we've been here 400 years. So that's a lot of freaking trauma.
Yeah.
Right. So what does it take? It's going to take the truth telling. It's going to take repairing what race broke through reparation. Yes. Do you realize people of African descent in America, African Americans, are the only group in American history that have never received any reparations for the federal oppression that we experienced, federally enforced oppression we experienced through the slaveocracy.
You know, when I realized that, when I read that in your book this week, so many things just had my eyes.
Boom.
I was talking to my book group, and I was just saying, I don't know how many times I have to say, we have read so many books. So you referenced My Grandmother's Hands. We spent 6 months last year 6 months in my grandmother's hands. We read it we only did one chapter a week. We did a deep dive.
Wow.
And then we had
that's right, one chapter a week, and that thing has a million chapters. It really does. It's like, wow. I mean, they're short, so it makes it a lot easier.
You
but
got to give yourself a minute, though.
Yeah, you really do.
It was,
I love that.
We have never spent that amount of time. And then at the end, Resma came and talked to us.
What? Okay, so now you're gonna have to give me the contact info.
yeah. But it's just the realization of the depth and the width and the breadth of it. And that it was explored there in a way I'd never heard it addressed before. And I'd never really thought about so many of the things that we just, there are so many things that we just assume are family heritage or just the way we are, when it's really embedded trauma.
Exactly.
It's really embedded trauma.
Yeah. And I love the way he talks about that clean pain thing, because Mindy Fully Love, Dr. Fully Love, she talks about our compounded trauma. It's basically trauma upon trauma upon trauma, and never having a moment. It's in her book, Aftershock. You never have a moment to breathe, because you have one trauma happening and then another one, right? And then another one, and then another one. I think a lot of us got a taste of that, quite honestly, under the last administration, because it felt like every news cycle wasn't just one cycle, it was 5 cycles, and every single point of it was another trauma. So I think we were all exhausted at the end of it. Oh, just I just need a break, right?
We haven't recovered.
We haven't recovered. We have not recovered. And now imagine, magnifying 4 years by 500. And that's the experience of African Americans in America. And, and so in the way that I love the way she talks about it is that she's not just talking about, the individual trauma that we experience, but the trauma that happens in our to our communities, right? The urban quote renewal that she talks about, which really means removal, urban removal of people of color and people of African descent from communities, so that they can put in a Starbucks and have dogs like mine walking around with a hoodie, right? Like that's I swear to you, my dog has a hoodie, right? So I did that. I mean, I'm doing that honestly because she's a small dog and she gets cold in the winter and all that, and I have the means to do that. But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about gentrification, right? I'm talking about the taking of land again through eminent domain. Like eminent domain is trauma. Eminent domain was we believe the death of my great grandfather Hiram Lawrence, who owned a block of homes in Elmwood, Philadelphia, this community called Elmwood that used to be located over where the airport is now and under the I-95, right? So they made him sell his house to the city for pennies on the dollar. And he died later that year. He never even moved into the new house. The new house, which was now, it was 2 blocks from where I'm sitting right now. Only his wife moved in there, Ella Fortune, a direct descendant of Fortune Gay McGee. And so she lived about 2 blocks away, and that was the one house that he could buy after they forced him to sell a block of homes for pennies.
Wow.
So what did that do? That took away our birthright. That took away the funding that would have paid for my college education and my sister's college educations. Instead, we scraped and prayed our way through school every single year. And we did it. We were able to do it. So many more are not able to do it.
Again, I'm just resonating so much because I'm moving back to my childhood neighborhood. We just moved back this week. My mom literally lives next door. And so there's and I was talking to a friend today, and I said, they were checking in, and I was like, I just feel stretched right now. Like we're in a new year. I'm moving. There's the weather in the South is up and down right now. The tension that comes with moving, but then also this kind of latent trauma is starting to resurface.
Oh, yes. I know what you mean. I really do. I know exactly what you mean. And it's weird because I never experienced it before, right? I've lived in New York, LA, DC, and Philly. I grew up in Philly, left Philly at 10 years old, and really been outside of Philly ever since. But I found myself dealing, like experiencing the grief, like really the grief that my family went through in the 70s and the 80s, 90s, when this community went in, like became a war zone because of infiltration of crack and cocaine, heroin in this community, mostly heroin and crack. And both of those drugs killed my family. Heroin killed my uncle, literally killed my uncle. He died of a heroin overdose. And mind you, it's documented that those drugs were pumped in by the government, through the mafia and also through the police and through small-time drug dealers. And it was in order to justify coming in and literally breaking up Black communities because Nixon wanted to break up the vote that could challenge him. Literally.
And that is happening today.
That was the confession of his legislative director.
Yeah.
Right? Ehrlichman in 1990s. Yes, and the same thing is happening. Well, actually, I can't say the same thing in terms of the pumping of drugs into communities for that reason. I don't know. But what I do know is that the machinations of people with power right now that they're going through in order to keep power is obvious to all. We can all see it now. They're not doing anything in a hidden way. It's all right out there and explicit. Like people are being explicit
deeply
about
brazen,
it now. Yeah. So, but you know what gives me hope, y'all? What gives me hope is the reality that at every juncture in history, every single one, we made choices that got us into this place. This didn't just happen. It just didn't go poof. Okay. We're in this space where 1.5 million Black men are missing because of mass incarceration and death on the streets. Sometimes death by police and other times death by each other. That didn't just happen. It happened because of choices that we made about how we should live together. It happened because of the choice for urban removal. Right? It was because of the choice of neglect of communities, the choice to limit the capacity of people to flourish, either through, devaluing their home value, the land value of their homes, or through forcing them in the North and South to go and learn in segregated schools, even after the Board of Education versus Brown, like Brown versus Board. And so these were choices that were made, both local, state, and federal. And that is why I have hope, because if they were choices, that means they're man-made. This world we have right now, these constructs, the situation we have right now is a man-made situation, which means we can unmake it.
Yes. Amen. Amen. Amen.
We'll be back with part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Lisa Sharon Harper. See you real soon.